So tonight was Earth Hour. Thousands of people turned off the lights, while others, like myself, celebrated Human Achievement Hour, where we enjoyed the many wonderful things we can do with electricity, which often comes from carbon emitting sources. Energy is awesome. Without it, life would just suck. I'm very grateful for having electricity and other energy in my life, and my heart goes out to all those who have to go without it. As y'all may have guessed by now, I'd like to talk a little bit about global warming. As y'all know, there is still some debate as to whether temperatures are going to continue to rise and whether man is indeed causing it. However, let's pretend that temperatures will continue to rise and it is indeed all our fault. Well, as
Great.
many of y'all in Ottawa have noticed, we've had spectacular summer like temperatures in March, just over a week ago. We loved it. In the past century, the Earth has warmed about 0.8 degrees. That's it. In the IPCC's high emissions model, the Earth's temperature is expected to rise 6.4 degrees at the most. WTF? Well, that's fantastic. Imagine Ottawa 6.4 degrees warmer on average. The average high would be above zero all winter long. We would still get snow, but no snow cover. We would have summery temperatures from April through October. In fact, we will probably have to heat our homes a lot less, meaning we would consume less fossil fuels and thus emit less carbon emissions. And let's not forget the gorgeous scenery. Plants thrive in greenhouses. Thanks to them, we can get Canadian grown cucumbers all winter long. So, what's wrong with the greenhouse effect? Carbon dioxide is perfectly natural. In fact, you emit carbon dioxide every time you breathe out. So, for all those of y'all that are really concerned about global warming, here's a trick. Stop breathing. Two birds, one stone. Just saying. Anyway, cars and power plants emit carbon dioxide as well. And plants love CO2. Love it! They grow better with higher concentrations of CO2 in the atmosphere. As for animals, for the most part, they will probably appreciate the warmer temperatures, as they can always move or adapt if they don't like it. Now, it won't be all roses. Polar ice caps may melt and sea levels will rise, up to 9 decimeters according to the IPCC, but that shouldn't be too much of a problem. Every year in Canada, the temperatures vary between about minus 25 to 35 degrees Celsius. Every year, the ice freezes and melts. In the winter, the water line recedes. In the spring, it expands. I grew up near the river. Sometimes in the spring, we'd see the park at the bottom of the street get a little flooded, and ducks swimming in the path. The people who lived near the river had huge lots. Must be nice. And their houses were far enough away from the river to be not even close to getting flooded. Another meter isn't going to do them in. And if it is, how expensive is a wall? On the net, higher temperatures will cause more water to evaporate from the ocean, and so there will be more rain and thus fewer droughts. Now, certain countries near the equator that are already pretty damn hot will get hotter, and some of these countries that are already pretty dry might experience more droughts and stuff. But other parts of the world further away from the equator, like Canada and the United States, will see a longer growing period and thus an increased crop yield. A quick glance at a globe will tell you that there is a greater land mass closer to the North Pole than the equator, so on the net, crop yields should increase. As for storms, despite global warming over the past century, the frequency of storms has not increased. There have been several natural disasters over the past few years, including the tsunamis in Japan and Southeast Asia, which were caused by earthquakes. Also, the earthquakes in Haiti and Chile, etc., which all have nothing to do with the weather. And then there's Hurricane Katrina. Now, Katrina was the only major natural disaster in people's minds in the past few years that had anything to do with weather. It was a very unfortunate event, and many people did perish. In the winter of 2011, I had the opportunity to visit New Orleans. It's a gorgeous town, and most of it has recovered from the negative effects of Katrina. Y'all should know, however, that New Orleans is basically built in swampland, which makes it particularly vulnerable to this sort of thing. I spoke around the lower Ninth Ward, which was particularly hard hit. It wasn't exactly Beverly Hills before Katrina, and many of the residents simply fled their homes, and their homes remain destroyed and abandoned till this day. It's kind of sad. The people in the area know that they are particularly vulnerable to flooding, hence why they made the levees. Unfortunately, the levees weren't high enough or strong enough. Several investigations following the aftermath of Katrina revealed that there were serious engineering flaws in the levees. Most unfortunately, no improvements have been made since Katrina, so if a similar hurricane were to happen again, they would be just as fucked. Indeed, there are other hurricanes in the US, particularly in Florida, but Katrina seems to have caused the most damage and loss of life. But really, Katrina was a human tragedy. I'm sure y'all remember how poorly the evacuation effort was handled, and in doing research for this video, I found it particularly heart-wrenching that a large chunk of the victims were seniors living in nursing homes. Y'all would think that the staff would take more responsibility and evacuate them sooner. Y'all would think. Storms have not increased in frequency, but there are now more people in the world, and more people living in vulnerable areas with fancier homes and buildings than in the past. So more damage is done. We also hear about it more often simply because we live in such a globalized world with amazing communications technologies like satellites that allow news organizations to quickly show us what is going on all over the world as it happens. I think in the past, when it would take months to hear about what happened, say, 1,000 kilometers away from us, we simply wouldn't know and wouldn't care. And what about the poor? Well, those who live in the waterfront will most likely be the hardest hit by rising sea levels, and they tend to be rich. Furthermore, the IPCC's highest emission models assume that the whole world will be a hell of a lot richer than they are now. That's how there can be such high emissions. Especially the poor, they're going to be much richer than now. That would be lovely. They expect, perhaps unrealistically, that countries with a per capita income of about $1,000 will see that rise to about $66,000 in the next century. If so, I'm sure they'll all be just fine. They can afford to adapt to climate change. It is no surprise that high carbon emissions and high GDP go hand in hand. Burning fossil fuels causes carbon emissions. We burn fossil fuels to generate energy. We use energy to power our factories and other industry. Industry makes us wealthier, which allows us to buy such wonderful things as cars, which burn fossil fuels and thus emit carbon, and TVs and computers, which require electricity to run. Such electricity, of course, often comes from fossil fuels. In many less industrialized countries, there are frequent blackouts. It's hard to set up a factory there knowing you can't count on the electricity that you need to run it. In short, we make our money and enjoy it thanks to fossil fuels. Some would argue that we should do everything we can to mitigate climate change, as the results, even if extremely improbable, would be incredibly disastrous. Well, as I'm proving here, the results will not be so disastrous, and this type of reasoning isn't entirely rational. For example, the chances that a huge asteroid will collide with the Earth and wipe out humanity are about 1 in 100 billion. Yet we spend only about $4 million a year to track these asteroids. Meh, I'm okay with risking it. There is a level of acceptable risk, and we take acceptable risks every day. For instance, whenever you cross the street, there's a slight chance you could get hit by a car and die. But most of us are willing to take that chance. If you never take a risk, you have never really lived. I remember when I was a kid, and I learned about the environment and the biggest challenges it faced: acid rain, the hole in the ozone layer, and global warming. We dealt with the first two just fine. In fact, businesses were able to make money off stopping acid rain by sequestering the pollutant that causes it and selling it as a byproduct. I bet that really pissed the hippies off. If aliens were to observe us, they'd probably think that we're warming our planet on purpose. In fact, when I was younger, I read an article about how we would go about colonizing Mars if we ever decided to do that. They suggested we do just that, emit a whole bunch of greenhouse gases to create a greenhouse effect on Mars so it would warm up a little for us. The Earth is also a little too cold. It could use a bit of warming. Now, the costs of mitigating climate change, while not extraordinary, are simply not worth it. We have to ask the developing world to not follow in our footsteps in doing the things that made us so prosperous. And also, we are taking money away from those who are productive and efficient and giving it to the inefficient. For example, in Ontario, the government will pay you 80 cents per kilowatt hour to put solar panels on your home, but they will sell that power for far less. They'll sell it for less than 10 cents per kilowatt hour. What a waste. And the money is coming from those Ontarians who spend their money wisely and manage to make a lot more money with it. And then they go and spend it so unwisely. Some people argue that global warming is messing with the so-called natural state of the world, and we never know what can happen when we take the world out of its finely tuned balance. But the fact is, there is no natural state of the world. The Earth has been warmer and cooler than it is now, and many other things have changed several times as well. So what is the natural state anyway? And since when are liberals so afraid of change? There are only so many fossil fuels anyway. We will most likely run out of them before we can cause too much damage. Now that y'all know how great global warming is, I bet y'all are wondering, why are so many people against it? Well, good question. My theory is that there are certain people that are simply against capitalism, industrialism, or just humanity in general, and they're using this as an excuse to bring it down. But most people probably have good intentions and have just been misled by the former set. I noticed that even among the anti-global warming crowd, like in films such as The Great Global Warming Swindle, there is much talk about how we're not causing global warming, but only a slight nod to the fact that global warming is actually a positive phenomenon. I wish this aspect would be discussed more. I would love to see a documentary just about how awesome global warming is going to be. By the way, a lot of the facts I use in this video came from Matt Ridley's book, The Rational Optimist. It's quite awesome. I just suggest y'all check it out. Anyway, don't worry about global warming. Just enjoy it.
It's getting hot in here, so take off all your clothes.